When I was 10 years old, I learned that birthdays weren't about celebrations, they were about the hierarchy of the spotlight. In the Collins household, attention was a finite resource, and my older sister, Leah, owned the monopoly on it. Her birthdays were cinematic events, confetti cannons, professional photographers, and long, emotional speeches from our parents about her limitless potential. My birthdays, by contrast, were lessons in independence. I remember my 12th birthday vividly. There was no cake, only a small envelope containing a monthly bus pass and a lecture from my father about the importance of navigating the world on my own 2 feet. I remember the bus driver's name, Henry. He used to wave every morning as I climbed on, my backpack always feeling 5 pounds heavier than my shoulders could handle. The seat beside me was always empty. I grew comfortable in that emptiness. It was the only place where I didn't have to shrink myself to make room for Leah. At home, everything was measured. My mother measured love in social results, my father measured it in financial returns. When Leah joined the debate club, it was leadership. When I joined the robotics team and spent my weekends covered in solder and grease, it was a hobby. My mother would walk into my room, wrinkle her nose at the tangle of wires and the scribbles of Python code on my whiteboard, and sigh. "Try something people actually notice, Alice," she would say, her eyes already drifting toward the hallway, looking for Leah. Leah got the newer laptop, the room with the bay window, and the steady, warm glow of our parents' approval. I got the quiet parts. I was the one who edited Leah's essays to make her sound smarter than she was. I was the one who fixed my father's phone when he locked himself out of his apps. I was the practical one. The helpful one. Neither of those words felt like love. They felt like a job description for a position I never applied for. The night of the Paris dinner is etched into my mind like a photograph developed in acid. The air in the dining room smelled of polished silver, expensive lilies, and overcooked roast beef. Leah sat across from me, her face glowing under the crystal chandelier. She was rehearsing French phrases, her accent clumsy but adored, while our mother corrected her between sips of a vintage Chardonnay. I had spent that entire day at the local library, fixing a bug in a freelance project. My fingers still smelled faintly of espresso and the ozone of burnt circuits. I was tired, but I was there. I was always there. My father cleared his throat, a sound that usually preceded a corporate announcement. "We've finalized the numbers," he said, his voice ringing with a strange, solemn pride. $80,000. It covers the tuition at the Sorbonne, the flat in the 7th arrondissement, airfare, and a healthy monthly allowance. Leah deserves to focus on her studies, not on the vulgarity of money. $80,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was my parents' entire liquid savings account, the money they had always said was for the girls' futures. 80,000? I whispered, my fork freezing halfway to my mouth. That's the whole fund, isn't it? My father nodded, unbothered. It's an investment, Alice. Leah has the charisma to change the world. We put our resources where they bring the highest return. The word investment stuck in my throat like a shard of glass. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to remain steady. I'm short on my dorm deposit for this upcoming semester. $2,000 would cover it and my books. I'll pay it back by the end of the year with my freelance work. My mother didn't even look up from her plate. You don't deserve help, Alice. The sound wasn't loud, but it landed with the weight of a falling building. Even Leah stopped her French rehearsal. I waited for my father to correct her, to say that of course I deserved the same start as my sister. He didn't. He just refilled his wine glass. You made your own choices, Alice, he said. You chose the technical path. You're practical, remember? You don't need the padding that a girl like Leah does. Something inside me went perfectly still. Every detail of that room, the hum of the refrigerator, the smell of the candle wax, the way the light caught the pearls on my mother's neck, was archived. I realized then that I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a low-yield asset. I stood up. The screech of the chair against the hardwood floor was the loudest thing I had ever said in that house. I understand, I said quietly. I walked out of the house into the cold Seattle rain. I didn't take a suitcase. I just took my laptop and the bus pass I had kept in my wallet for years. That was the night I stopped asking for fairness. That was the night I started building a world where their math didn't matter. The next 4 years were a blur of caffeine, code, and a very specific kind of silence. I moved into a studio apartment in Capitol Hill that was so small the heater clicked every 10 minutes like a ticking clock. It smelled of detergent and the burnt toast of the neighbors, but it was mine. I deleted every family contact from my phone. I didn't block them. That felt too dramatic. I simply erased the names until they were just strings of digits I no longer recognized. By day, I brewed coffee at a tech-heavy cafe, listening to the conversations of engineers and venture capitalists. By night, I sat under a yellow desk lamp and built the prototype for what would become Wayfinder Labs. My therapist, Dr. Monroe, helped me find the vocabulary for my past: conditional love, emotional invalidation, the scapegoat dynamic. They didn't reward you for being good, Alice, she told me during one session. They rewarded you for being useful. Then I'll make usefulness my own, I replied. I landed a contract job at a logistics startup. It was there I met Arjun, a man who saw code the way I did, as a way to fix the broken roots of the world. We spent nights testing algorithms until the sun turned the office blinds a dusty gray. We created Wayfinder, a module that optimized delivery routes for small businesses, cutting fuel costs and emissions by 40%. When the pilot program succeeded, Arjun called it innovation. I called it proof. Wayfinder Labs exploded. Within 3 years, we went from 2 desks to 2 entire floors of a glass building overlooking Lake Union. I became the CTO and co-founder. I didn't buy a Ferrari or a designer wardrobe. I still wore my gray hoodies. But I upgraded my hardware, and I kept my old, cracked laptop in a drawer like a holy relic. Every milestone I logged, every invoice I tagged, it wasn't about the money. It was about architecture. I was building a fortress of independence that no one could ever breach again. Success has a way of being quiet until it isn't. For years after walking out of that dinner, I bought a house. It was a minimalist structure of glass and cedar in Medina, facing the water. It cost $5 million, a number that would have sounded like science fiction to the girl with the bus pass. I moved in on a Tuesday. The air smelled of wet cedar and the fresh, cold scent of the lake. I hung only one thing on the wall of the expansive, empty living room: the green bus pass from my 18th birthday, framed in museum-grade glass. Beneath it, I wrote a small note to myself: broken roots, better paths. I stood by the glass wall that evening, watching the rain trace slow, rhythmic lines down the window. I thought of my parents. I wondered if they still believed Leah was their best return. I wondered if they ever realized they had traded a daughter for an image. The silence of the house was interrupted on a Saturday morning. My phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar. Instinctively, I swiped. Alice, is it really you? It was Leah. Her voice was trembling, stripped of its usual rehearsed charm. I just drove past a listing in Medina. The gate, the name on the property record. Alice, do you really live there? I looked out at my sprinklers, clicking in rhythm with the silence. What are you trying to ask, Leah? Why do you have that? She whispered, her voice cracking. How do you have that? The call dropped. But the silence didn't return. Within an hour, the digital ghosts of my past came screaming back. The messages poured in like a dam had burst. My mother's voice was the first on the machine, polished, performative, and utterly devoid of an apology. Alice, darling. Leah told us the most unbelievable news. Call us immediately. She's very upset, and you know how she gets when she's stressed. We need to talk about this, division in the family. Then came my father. His voice was heavy, measured, as if he were negotiating a settlement. Maya, Alice. It's your father. Let's talk like adults. We're still family. Family. The word that is only ever used as a weapon when someone needs a favor. A courier arrived that evening with a hand-delivered letter from my mother. The handwriting was expensive, the paper cream-colored. Leah is expecting, it began. You're going to be an aunt. Isn't it time to heal? Your father has been struggling with his practice, and the roof of the family home needs a total replacement. It's $20,000 we just don't have. Family supports each other. I know you aren't a cold person, Alice. I folded the paper and placed it in the trash. I didn't get angry. I just felt a profound sense of clarity. They didn't miss Alice the daughter. They missed Alice the useful one. They had seen the $5 million house and recalculated their math. I was finally a high-return investment. I agreed to meet my father once. We met at a small cafe near the Fremont Bridge. He arrived in a pressed coat, but his eyes were dimmer than I remembered. He looked like a man who had spent too much time trying to maintain an image he couldn't afford. "You look different," he said, staring at me. "Different is fine," I replied. He spent 20 minutes trying to smooth over the past. He called my mother's cruelty a misunderstanding. He said they did what they could and that parents make mistakes. "It wasn't a mistake, Dad," I said, cutting through his excuses. "It was math." He blinked, confused. "Math? You invested $80,000 in an image," I said, leaning forward. "You invested in the daughter who looked good in photos. I built value out of nothing because I had to. The difference between us is honesty. You called me an unproductive asset that night. I just took your advice and went elsewhere." He didn't argue. He just stared at his coffee as the steam faded into nothing. When I stood up to leave, I didn't feel the need to hug him. I just felt done. "You don't owe me anything, Dad," I said. "And I don't owe you. That's the only way we can ever be even." The climax of our story didn't happen in a kitchen or a cafe. It happened at Seattle's annual education fundraiser gala. Wayfinder Labs was a gold-tier sponsor. I knew my parents would be there. My father had spent years cultivating his reputation as a supporter of the arts. The hall shimmered in gold leaf and expensive perfume. I arrived with Arjun, wearing a simple, structured black gown. I saw them immediately. My mother in her signature pearls. Leah in a pale blue maternity dress that softened her features. They approached me with practiced smiles, sensing the eyes of the city's elite on them. "We came to congratulate you, Alice," my mother whispered, her voice like honeyed steel. "You've done so well. But remember, success means giving back to those who raised you. Leah's baby is coming, and your father, well, the house is falling apart." I let her finish. Then, I turned to the gala host. "Excuse me, I believe it's time for the personal pledges." I stepped onto the stage. The spotlight was hot, blinding, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to hide from it. I took the microphone. "Tonight," I said, my voice echoing through the silent hall, "I'd like to make a personal contribution. My parents once told me that money should only be placed where it brings a return. They once gave $80,000 to my sister while telling me I didn't deserve a cent of help." I could see my mother's face from the stage. Her smile didn't just fade, it cracked like dry earth. "So tonight," I continued, "I am donating exactly $80,000 to a new scholarship fund. It's for young women in the STEM fields who have been told by their own families that they aren't worth the investment. I'm calling it the Bus Pass Scholarship." The applause didn't just start. It rolled through the room like thunder. I looked straight at my mother as I handed the pearl-white envelope to the host. "You called it an investment," I said, though only she could hear me through the roar of the crowd. "So do I." I walked off that stage and straight out the doors into the Seattle night. I didn't wait for their reactions. I didn't need to see my father's frozen expression or Leah's tears. The rain was falling again, thin, steady, and cleansing. The next morning, the city was washed in a thick, silver mist. I stood on my deck in Medina, barefoot on the cold wood, watching a heron cross the water. My phone was inside, face down on the kitchen island. It hadn't rung once since the gala. My mother finally understood that I wasn't for sale, and my father finally understood that his math was broken. Inside the house, the coffee was brewing. The scent mixed with the smell of the lake. I walked into my office and looked at the green bus pass on the wall. They once told me I didn't deserve help. And in a strange, twisted way, they were right. I didn't need help. I needed distance. I needed the silence to hear my own voice. Now, when the rain hits the glass, it doesn't sound like the night I was exiled. It doesn't sound like sorrow or a broken dorm deposit. It sounds like proof. If you've ever been told you weren't enough, or that your potential wasn't worth the investment, remember this. The loudest answer you can ever give is the life you build without their permission. Sometimes, walking away is the only way to win the game. My name is Alice Collins. I am not an investment. I am the architect. And the view from here is perfect. If this story stirred something inside you, don't scroll away in silence. Tap like, it tells us these stories deserve to be told. Subscribe to Vengeful Goddess for unforgettable tales of betrayal, resilience, and justice, stories you won't hear anywhere else. Turn on the bell icon, so the next story reaches you the moment it drops. Your support keeps these voices alive. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud, being heard is.